I'm always fascinated when people tell me all around the world that they appreciate or even just accept Trump because he stands up to China. And that means very different things in many different parts of the world, standing up to China. We all have very different relationships to that great nation. I find it interesting, though, because it acknowledges that there is a superpower and there must be a dominant one, and that we must choose sides. This is the difficult part because in many parts of the world, they don't understand Trump's dog whistling, the racist ways that he describes everyone who is not just like him. They don't have a great appreciation for his classism and how classism operates within the American context, especially given our consumer culture and its promise of equality, that anybody can go to the mall and we're all equal there. I find it interesting when people support Trump, people who are not citizens of the United States, but people all around the world who are directly impacted by his behavior. Often we don't look at how his behavior impacts others. I'm always fascinated when people around the world support Trump when he is so anti-immigrant. And instead of identifying with the immigrant in America, they choose to identify with the majority in their own culture, in their own countries, and say, well, if I were in his position, I would be just as xenophobic. That's ultimately what they're saying. They don't know and don't care to know about his racism, because remember, all around the world, people have loved black culture. But how many people really and truly listened to the black lives that weren't mattering? Not just the police killings, but especially the police killings. It took an actual movement during a pandemic shutdown for the world to be able to be still long enough to hear something that must sound like an echo when he calls Mexicans rapists, when he talks about thugs, when he says that police should handle them, roughhouse them. They're also supporting that because that's very clearly his mandate. And currently, he sent federal troops even above and beyond state legislators, municipal legislators, and in some places in the world, maybe that's acceptable and normal. But in the real America, the one that we don't always see in Hollywood, especially the mainstream films that make it to cinemas around the world, you can see it on Netflix, but those don't show the real America. You can't know America unless you understand racism. It's literally impossible. So I'm always fascinated when people support Trump and they tell me all about America and they've never actually met an American or spoken with them in the flesh, and certainly not an American of color, because as we all know, one thing that white privilege does is insulates all of us to knowledge about this clear thread, the roots of America's original sin. So you can't know America unless you understand racism and classism and sexism and how we experience that internally and how we've forever, from the moment we were incepted as a country, that we have resisted. I'm always fascinated when people tell me they support Trump and yet they haven't really looked at him.